In Washington, the war is over.
For the first time in 9 years, there are no Americans fighting in Iraq. After a decade of war that's cost us thousands of lives and over $1 trillion, the nation we need to build is our own.
In keeping with the presidential campaign promise, the United States is moving on.
Iraq is no more a problem. Iraq is rebuilding itself. Iraq has become partially stable.
The major resource for economic development is the development of the oil industry. These contracts have been signed. They are very good contracts.
A bright economic future, a functioning democracy. That's the message out of Baghdad's international zone, where Iraq's government now sits. It's a different era from when I first arrived in Iraq a few weeks after the US-led invasion, and the years I stayed on to report what came afterwards. When I was last here, this place was called the Green Zone, and there were American soldiers everywhere. You could see them at checkpoints, jogging around this entire compound. Now you don't see US troops here at all, and the one clear presence that the US does have, its huge embassy, one of the largest in the world, now looks set for a downsizing. After nearly a decade of occupation and nation building, the US has pulled back. It's withdrawn its military, and by the end of this year, US spending here will be just 5% of what it was at its peak, the year President Obama was running for office.
Our feeling here in Iraq that the Americans are worried about their elections. They just want to have the election and then they will think about Iraq afterward.
With another US election just months away, I'm returning with the Fault Lines team to travel across Iraq, from south to north, to take the pulse of a country and its people after the Americans. It's been 5 years since I was last in Iraq. Back then, coalition troops were still deployed in the southern city of Basra. The military has left, but many of the British soldiers who were based here have stayed on. This time, they're here for the money. Business is booming for their clients too. Iraq is pumping record amounts of oil, and production contracts to develop the country's massive southern oil fields have been auctioned off to foreign companies.
There's many Chinese companies here because Iraq is becoming better and better.
Do you think?
Yes, I think.
Why?
The war finished and America will go home. Yes, and more other companies come here.
China's National Petroleum Corporation has partnered with British giant BP to develop the Rumaila oil field, the largest in Iraq. Newly arrived Chinese oil workers and other foreign employees meet their security details in this car park at Basra Airport. For us too, a private security escort is still obligatory, and this is ours. Basra was the first city to fall in the 2003 US-led invasion. I came here that summer to report on angry protests that had broken out against the lack of electricity. Today, there isn't much improvement in the basic services people were protesting for 9 years ago. Basra still suffers power cuts. Unemployment also is widespread here. Almost a quarter of people under 30 don't have jobs. And while there are signs of new money flowing in, the cost of living is rising fast.
كانوا تحت ذريعة الديمقراطية دخلوا طيب وهم خلصونا من نظام عتيد ديكتاتوري طيب ولكن في نفس الوقت فرزت المرحلة مشاكل عويصة مشاكل كبيرة جدا واجهها الشعب.
For 9 years, union leader Hashmeya al-Sadawi has fought to keep Iraq's oil wealth flowing to Iraqis, not just to foreign companies. Iraq's Deputy Prime Minister for Energy says that the deals the government has signed with foreign investors are reaping rewards.
We have already increased our production to 3 million barrels per day, and during this year we'll add another 500,000 or more barrel per day. So the progress is there.
But despite record output, in Basra there's frustration that companies developing the fields are importing labour, and that there is no meaningful legislation to protect Iraqi jobs.
خلي تجيبون وياهم عمالة أجنبية، ولكن العمالة الأجنبية خل تعتمد تكون خبراء. أنا أجيب لي عامل، ليش ما عندنا العمال اللي ما عندهم خبرة؟ ليش أجيب لي عامل من برا؟ جيب خبير أنت تحتاجه، نعم، وعلى شرط أن عمالنا تتدرب خلال هاي الفترة مع الشركة الأجنبية.
Sadawi says it was the US decision to dismantle Iraq's army and national industries in the name of de-Baathification that caused widespread unemployment and created a large pool of angry men ready to take up arms.
أكو عناصر في الجيش العراقي بدل من أن يكون هو المساند للشعب العراقي فحقد لأنه امتيازاته كلها خسرها، أصبح من كان هو يشتغل براتب محترم أصبح عاطل.
From Basra, we drive north toward Najaf, along a road lined with symbols that commemorate a battle lost and injustice done. The cemetery of Wadi al-Salam, or Valley of Peace, surrounds the city. It is possibly the largest burial ground in the world, and the final resting place to which many Shia aspire. The scale of this place is absolutely breathtaking. For 14 centuries, Shia from all over the world have been bringing their dead to be buried here. It's so immense that in Najaf they say their city is half for the living and half for the dead. In 2004, the serenity of the Valley of Peace was violated. That spring, fighters loyal to Muqtada al-Sadr, the son of one of Iraq's most revered Shia clerics, fought US forces in Baghdad and the holy cities of Karbala, Kufa, and here in Najaf. But RPG?
Yes, RPG. Yes, Al-Qudi.
And landed, yeah?
Yes.
Destroyed everything.
Come on.
At the beginning of August, trying to root out Sadr's Mahdi army and take control of Najaf, US Marines invaded the cemetery. We've been taken into a part of the graveyard where you can actually see the destruction from the fighting that took place in 2004. There's RPG holes in the walls. Some of these graves are completely destroyed. I remember speaking to Iraqis at the time who simply couldn't believe that things had deteriorated to such an extent that this, one of the most holy and sacred sites in all of Iraq, had turned into a battleground between the Mahdi army and the Americans. Hundreds of Mahdi fighters died in the battle. In a new section of the cemetery, built for Sadr's followers killed in the uprisings and sectarian violence that the US-led occupation provoked, families come to honor their dead. No one knows how many Iraqis have been killed since the invasion. Estimates range from more than 150,000 to over 1 million. For years, the US claimed not to keep a body count. But there are some 6,000 graves in this cemetery alone, where the grief seems impossible to bury. Ali Shaka Saddam's mother died during the violence in 2004. His brother is buried here in the section reserved for those killed by US forces.
وكنت أتمنى أن أكون في ركبهم. إني حرمت من انتفاضة النجف وانتفاضة الكوفة، ولحتى الآن أرجو أن يرزقني هكذا ربي لمقاتلة هؤلاء المبغضون الذين أساءوا لنا وسرقوا مقدراتنا، سرقوا حتى آثارنا، دمروا حتى آثارنا.
These were the people the US military expected to welcome them. But they soon made enemies of people like Ali and his family.
لكن عندما وإن كان لنا هاجس أن المحتل لا يكون محررا أبدا، لكننا انتظرنا لفترة أشهر ورأينا بأم أعيننا كيف كانوا يسحقون على رؤوس العراقيين وكيف يتجاوزون على النساء وكيف ويقودهم وأداتهم أقول العملاء الذين جاءوا بركبهم.
In America, they think this is over.
المحتل رحل وآثاره باقية. آثاره كل يوم تنكجره، كل يوم تجري دموعنا.
Muqtada al-Sadr's followers listened to him deliver some of his most incendiary sermons against the occupation here, at his base in the nearby city of Kufa. Now, Sadr spends much of his time in Iran, and on this Friday he isn't here. But the message is political, populist, and doesn't shy away from criticizing the government in Baghdad.
وما نشاهده في السنين الأخيرة من استمرار القوى السياسية للصراعات من أجل مصالح فئوية وشخصية والإهمال الكبير في جوانب مهمة وكثيرة.
The sermon addresses the deepening conflict between Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's party and opposition blocs that has virtually paralyzed parliament for months.
وأبرزها الجانب الخدمي والأمني.
Over the years, Sadr has cultivated the image of an independent champion of the dispossessed Shia who make up his base. And he's transformed himself from a leader of a militia into the leader of a political party, an important one on which Maliki relies to maintain power. For years, Saddam Hussein had banned public celebrations of Shia festivals and limited the flow of Iranian pilgrims to Najaf. Now the pilgrims and tourists are back, prompting a boom in trade and hotel development. And there are unconfirmed reports that Iran is planning to spend $1 billion to refurbish the Imam Ali shrine. After decades of being victims, the Shia majority in Iraq have emerged the victors. A Shia now holds the top post of Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief, and government positions are distributed according to ethnic and sectarian quotas. The new balance of power in Iraq has raised fears that Iran's influence is growing, both in Baghdad and here in Najaf. Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani is the top spiritual guide for Iraqi Shia and the leader of the school of clerics that guard this shrine. Early in the occupation, he demanded the US organize direct elections while opposing Iranian-style theocratic governance. But Sistani is 81 years old, and there are reports that Iran is campaigning to have one of their Ayatollahs succeed him. All the time that we were walking around inside the shrine, we were being very closely watched by the media team. And one of the most interesting things that they told us is that we specifically shouldn't focus on any Iranians. The clerics here, like Shia Iraqis throughout the country, are defensive about the insinuation that Iran is taking over. In Iraq these days, regional ambitions run like undercurrents, reshaping the country. But over the past 9 years, political violence has literally refashioned the landscape. I haven't been back to Baghdad in about 5 years, and we're only just entering the city, but immediately the first thing that strikes you as you drive in is one thing that's really changed: these walls. Baghdad is battle-scarred and sectioned off by blast walls that were raised first around government ministries and military bases, then around hotels filled with foreigners, and then, as sectarian attacks escalated, around neighborhoods. The city was reconfigured as Iraqis fled mixed areas for the relative safety of religious and ethnically homogeneous enclaves. Harboring the wounds and stories of the bloodshed the occupation unleashed, many remain there, protected by concrete walls, checkpoints, and each other. More than 1.3 million people across Iraq are still displaced. And in Baghdad, almost 500,000 remain in camps like this one, on the edge of the Shia neighborhood of Kadamiyah. Abu Sajjad's family was living in Talmiyah, a Sunni neighborhood north of Baghdad where resistance to the occupation was fierce. Al-Qaeda also found a home there, as it chased others out.
بالليل يعني أوراق مكتوبة يذبونها الصبح تلقاها بالباب بالشارع ما أدري شنو هي.
When the family fled, they left everything behind and squatted here. And although they live in constant fear of eviction, they say they can't return to Tamir.
اكو ناس يعني احزاب يعني موجوده لا زال بالعراق هي مستفاده يعني وعصابات. عصابات شنو العصابات؟ يعني حد قوه. يعني انا عندي حزب عنده قوه اقدر اقتل واذبح واجيب واسلب وانهب. ما اكو غيرها. الفقير ضايع قبل ولا هس.
In the Sunni neighborhood of Jazeera, where they came to escape threats from the Mahdi army in 2006, Hannah Naif and her mother-in-law are struggling to care for their household, including Hannah's 2 kids. Like almost 1 in 10 women in Iraq, they are widows. Hannah's husband Hussein was killed by US forces during a raid on a market in 2005. She had just learned she was pregnant with their second child, Abdullah.
خربطت بالباب ما ادري يعني شنو بالدنيا بس كانوا يقنعوني بان هو مصوب لحد الليل يلا قالوا لي يعني ما اتصور شنو حالتي كانت مثل يعني صدمه مو طبيعيه ما تتوصف
حتى الطفل تذبه
بدايه يعني الطفل الثاني حتى تذبه بعدين استغفرت يعني رب العالمين وهذا التهيت بيهم بس يعني ما انسى ابد يعني لهذا اليوم اني
2 years later, Madia's second son, Nouri, was killed in a militia attack. The family lost another breadwinner, and bureaucracy has made it difficult for them to get the support payment the government extends to widows.
What's the legacy that they think the US has here?
خلفونا الدمار يوم دمار شامل أنا أقول لك دمار شامل صابنا إحنا هنا حكومة ظالمة ما تسأل على المحتاج ولا يعني حتى معاملة بالدولة إحنا ما تمشينا ماكو.
صحيح النظام السابق كان مدينة يعني وزاد بس يمكن النظام السابق يعني زادت على ما ساتهس كان يموت واحد يموت هسه يموتون 100.
شو انظر لهم يعني اتمنى انا يعني عندي يعني سلطه اتمنى يعني ما ادري لو اعرف افجر نفسي بيهم انا لهالدرجه يعني ما يخالف استغني بس يعني اشوف يتاذون يعني ما يخالف.
اذا ادعوا لك ديمقراطيه اذا هم سلبوا الديمقراطيه من الوجود، اذا ادعوا لك حريه اذا هم استعبدوك. فكل اللي جاي يكون على امر الواقع عندنا هنا هو نقيض كامل لما يدعون من شعارات، مجرد شعارات لتغطيه اباحتهم لكل حقوق الانسان.
Qasim Mehdi Halas spent 7 months in US custody at Abu Ghraib prison and more than a year and a half in other US-run detention camps. He has testified to US military investigators that at Abu Ghraib he was stripped and paraded naked with a sack over his head, dressed in women's underwear, cuffed and hung from a window frame for hours when he asked to pray, and beaten into unconsciousness.
من تهديد بانه راح نسجن النساء نجيبها هنا نعذبها من التهديد بالاغتصاب يعني اليا والكل المعتقلين يعني حتى انه تهديد لا تتصوره مجرد كلام يعني انا بوحده من عندهن الحالات شاهدت اغتصاب طفل جابوه اغتصبوه امامي.
He says it was part of US interrogators' strategy as they tried to quell resistance that the US termed terrorism, detaining people across the country, especially those from Sunni areas.
كانوا يردون من عندي اسماء ناس يعني شلون اقول لك يعني حي الله ناس يعني اي ناس انطينا اسماء اي ناس زين وبعد كل تحقيق يبدي المسلسل مال التعذيب.
And the types of regions that they used to target in 2003, 2004
نفس واغراض اخرى.
Over the past year, human rights groups have reported that Iraqi government security forces have conducted sweeps, preemptively arresting hundreds of people, detaining and sometimes torturing them in secret prisons inside the international zone. Some are the same people who were detained by the Americans and were accused of being terrorists then. Many live in Sunni areas in and around Baghdad, from where armed groups still orchestrate attacks. The government says there are no secret prisons.
I could say that there is no secret detention, so we welcome now Human Rights Watch, Amnesty Organization, and United Nations Organization to come and to check and to find out whether there is a secret detention center in Iraq.
But the arrests have fueled the perception in communities like this one that the government is targeting them, much like US forces used to. We've come for Friday prayer in Adamir, a Sunni neighborhood that for many years was an important center of anti-occupation resistance. Getting here hasn't been easy.
We're currently being stopped from getting access to the main mosque in Adamir by a police checkpoint, and further down the street there are soldiers too. Our security guards currently negotiating with them to get approval for something we already have approval to do.
And when prayers are over, no one here is willing to speak to us.
People here are definitely scared to speak on camera. They're saying that if they talk to us, they think they'll be arrested down the line. And we've now been told that we're not allowed to film anywhere outside the compound around Adamir Mosque. The guards have taken down the details of our security guards and said that if we go outside that gate and start filming, we'll be arrested.
I can't speak, but many people, if you want to bring them here and make an interview with them, they cannot talk. Because if they talk, they will be taken to be detained maybe 24 hours, 40 hours, 48 hours late.
Deputy Prime Minister Salah al-Mutlaq tells us that the fear we've felt in Adamir is warranted. He receives frequent reports that those arrested face extortion by security forces.
When they are going to go to the trial, they have to pay money in order to go to the trial. Otherwise, they will not be trialed and they will stay for another 10 years.
Mutlaq's duties as the Sunni Deputy Prime Minister were temporarily suspended shortly after US troops withdrew in December, and after he called Prime Minister Maliki a dictator.
Iraq cannot be run by one party and one man, especially when it was based on sectarianism.
But there are many political parties that exist. There were elections held here. There are ministries controlled by different ministers. This isn't a dictatorship.
Who is running the Ministry of Defense? Who is running the Ministry of Interior? Who is running the intelligence? Who is running all the security departments in this country? It's one man.
We're going to meet someone who says he never sleeps in the same place for more than a couple of nights. Uday al-Zaidi is a leader of the popular movement to save Iraq, a group that helped bring thousands of people into Baghdad's Tahrir Square on February the 25th, 2011, as uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt were unfolding. As well as demanding jobs and basic services, they protested Iraq's system of sectarian governance, which Zaidi blames the US for setting up.
بنوا عملية سياسية على المحاصصة الطائفية، يعني رئيس الوزراء يجب أن يكون شيعي ورئيس البرلمان سني والرئيس الجمهورية كردي. احنا نريد نغير كل هذا. تبعات الاحتلال الأمريكي نريدها تتغير، نعود إلى دستور وطني لا يفرق بين مذهب ومذهب ولا دين وقومية.
Zaidi was among those detained by government security forces in the crackdown that followed the February protest. He shows us evidence of having been beaten. In spite of the repression, he and many other protesters have continued trying to gather peacefully every Friday. They don't want to give the government any pretext to use anti-terror legislation to shut them down.
يعني كثير من العراقيين قتلوا، لذلك أردنا أن نغلق الطريق أمام الحكومة العراقية حتى لا نتهم بالإرهاب، وخصوصا بعد خروج المحتل سنناضل سلميا حتى نغير الوضع في العراق. لذلك نحن لا نستعمل السلاح.
Do you think Article 4 is sometimes being interpreted too broadly? There are complaints that this article of the Constitution is being used to arrest people, activists, pro-democracy demonstrators.
I would assure you and confirm, we never arrest somebody due to his opinion or where he's demonstrating in Tahrir Square, unless there is a crime record against him.
But lately, Iraqi security forces have blocked the streets leading to Tahrir Square, deterring dozens of activists who regularly attend the demonstrations from entering.
I think freedom of expression is guaranteed here in Iraq, but don't deny that Iraq is in the red threat, is under a great challenge and the threat from the terrorists. And you could find out those who kill the people, where from they are coming.
Next week, in the conclusion of this Fault Line special, we travel to Fallujah, where alarming rates of birth defects in newborn babies are being linked to the US assaults on the city. and we cross into the Kurdish north, where the promise of a bright future is falling short of expectations.